For this last section of the personnel psychology, the industrial psychology piece of this class, we will be discussing training. We will look at what goes into determining what training needs there are, talk about learning and memory, and discuss how to evaluate a training program. In the midst of this, you will go through your own training session, complete an evaluation, and then we will discuss the process. When we talk about training, we are including both training in the traditional sense of being task or job specific, but also socialization, learning about the cultures and customs of the organization or department in which one will be working. This also includes training in common HR practices and concerns, such as sexual harassment or retirement training. Both training and development are important, but what is the difference? Riggio's definition of training is a planned effort by an organization to facilitate employees' learning, retention, and transfer of job-related behaviors. So this is specific to the job. It's fitting the employee, making sure that employee has the specific requirements that are needed for that job. On the other hand, development includes efforts by the organization to focus on expanding the individual employee's KSAOs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, and helping guide the employee in long-range career planning. So this is focused much more on the individual, the employee, and what can enhance the job and experience of the employee, and looking long-term in where that employee is going. So why would we want to do that? Why would we be interested in the development of an employee? Well, there are several reasons. It makes employees generally more committed to the organization, and it enhances the job. It facilitates communication between different levels of an organization. And it also helps with staffing plans, like succession planning for leadership positions. We may know at one point that a manager is getting close to retiring and will need to fill that position. If we want to fill that position with someone internally, we may want to start developing someone we've seen as a potential person for that position. If we look back to Campbell's predictors of performance, we can match each component up with different types of learning. The declarative knowledge is factual. These are things that we hold in our head, that are in our memories. So we need to be concerned with memory. Our procedural knowledge can't be learned by simply studying a book. We have to actually do the actions and build the skills. We need to practice, we need to teach our muscles, develop muscle memory for any physical tasks. And then if we look at motivation, we need to create an environment for performance behaviors. We need to develop a reward punishment system, a schedule that encourages employees to do what we hope they will do. We look to imitation of other employees doing what we expect everyone to do. And in this place, we build habits. We do things enough that it becomes routine. So when we talk about requisite knowledge and skills, there are some things that are much more teachable than others. The knowledge and skills that may be needed for a job are things that we can teach someone. We can bring someone into the company and teach them. There are some things that are much less teachable or trainable. These include abilities that are innate and personality, which has some components of change over time, but are much more long-term. We need to recognize what is trainable and what isn't. How does this affect our employment process? Well, if we know that something is necessary for the job, but it isn't trainable, we're going to need to select the right employees that already have this characteristic. However, if something is trainable, it may be possible to select people who don't have that yet, the knowledge or skills, but they're things that we believe we can successfully train individuals to have. When we talk about training, we need to do a needs analysis. We look at what the job requires and what the employee already has. So for example, if we have a job in which someone needs proficiency in Microsoft Excel, we look at our job candidates or our current employees, whoever's going to be doing this job, and we ask what level of this proficiency they have. Well, say we look at them and we see that they've had exposure to Microsoft Excel, but not proficiency. And we might see this from their resume. And this job may require data entry ability, particularly fast data entry mobility of numbers, and having muscle memory to know the number pad without looking at it will enhance the speed at which people do the job. We might find this out by looking at a work sample that were given during the selection process. And perhaps the individual can do data entry, but they tend to look at the number pad in order to do it. So here are two related things for a job. We need to work on training employees so they have a higher level of these skills. When we're looking at program implementation, that needs assessment is the first piece to our process. We need to find out what the employees are lacking that are necessary for the job. Secondly, we're looking at clear objectives. What are the objectives for our training going to be? So in the case of the data entry, we may clearly want to develop muscle memory for where the numbers are on the keypad. Then we need to develop our program and test it to make sure that it's understandable. We implement the training by giving it to employees. And then a very important piece of this, which often gets overlooked, is evaluation. It's very important for us to know whether the training did what we hoped it would do. So often, organizations will spend a lot of money and time creating training programs. They make employees take time out of their day to come do this training, and they don't do an effective evaluation of whether it fit those objectives, if it accomplished those things that they hoped it would accomplish. In most cases, this is also a feedback loop. If we have an organization that's large enough or skills that need to be refreshed, we need to do an evaluation of the training and then come back to the needs assessment. Do employees still need training? Are they still lacking the skills to do that data entry? So we go back to the needs analysis. And this becomes an iterative process where we improve that training, looking to see whether it has done what we want.